Greetings to you all, and welcome to Back to Ashes. My name is Phoenix. I would like to thank the reformed members of the channel. Interscare Wifey, Denise S., Through Scrutiny, Samantha Play, Stephanie McLaren, Corpse Lover, Normie DW, Chrissy Elias, Cindy Cleveland, and Patty's niece. If you would like to become a member of the channel, or would like to buy me a coffee as a special thank you, all of the information can be found down below. If you are new here or haven't done so already, please don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment. Not only does it help the channel, but it also reminds you of every time I upload a video. With all of that being said, it is time to go back to ashes. For once we arise from the ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and a happier person in the morning. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack, or tuck in to get warm and prepare for this dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Creepy Encounters. Right after this intro and ad will play, I'll read the first story and ad will play, and after that there will be no more ads within this video. So, I went on a backpacking trip in some youth program in the North Cascades near Seattle. One of us got hurt by a falling rock on our way back to base camp, so I had to help carry him back to the trailhead while accompanied by one of the leaders. On our way back, we came across another hiker, a young woman. We talked as we were all sort of taking a rest, and she said she was going to Summit, one of the peaks later on in the trail. Thing is, trailhead to peak was about 8 hours one way. She had a light day pack. Next day, back at base camp, helicopters swarmed and men were dropping. It was like a movie. I was taken aback. Little did we all know, it was a huge search and rescue team looking for the same woman I had encountered with just about 16 hours before. Samantha Sayers, that's her name. For 3 days, every night, all I would hear was the distant calls of men and women yelling, "Samantha!" all echoing off the basin walls in an endless call for this person. I remember hearing it was a supposed suicide, that she was a seasoned hiker, yet she didn't pack nearly enough for this excursion. It didn't make any sense. Perhaps she wanted to last to get just far enough, then stay. That would be her final moment, atop a peak, doing something she absolutely loved. I remember after I flew home, I would never stop thinking of her. And I never have stopped. I still look up her name, just to find that she has never been found. That she is not just without her family, but that she has seemingly disappeared into nothing. It really bothers me, thinking of what those hours right after we spoke were like for her, what she last saw, what she last thought, what she last did. But it doesn't seem to matter, because whatever any of those answers were, they will quite possibly never be found, just like she never was. I cannot put into words how much this haunts me to this day. This happened a few months ago. I was driving home from a trip to the store while talking to my friend on the phone, around 9 or 10 p.m. I pull up into my driveway, park, and talk to my friend for a few minutes while I'm sitting in my car. All of a sudden, this sketchy car pulls up directly behind me. There's no way I could back out without hitting the passenger side of it. It's dark. My driveway lights are kinda dim, and they deliberately turned off the lights of their car when they pulled up behind me. But I faintly spotted 3 guys sitting in it. I'm feeling creeped out at this point, so I asked my friend what I should do, and we both decided I should wait it out a bit and see if they leave. A few more minutes go by, and they're still there. Eventually, we figured that the best plan of action would be to stay on the phone, calmly grab my bags from the trunk without breaking eye contact with the people in the car, and walk to the door, which is only about 15 feet away. In retrospect, it probably would have been a better idea to just call my parents and ask them to open the door for me from inside. I step outside, then grabbed my stuff from the trunk. The guy in the rear passenger seat of their car cracks the door open, and the guy in the front passenger seat is staring me down. They are definitely assessing if I'm a viable target. I kept eye contact with them, but I felt like a deer in headlights. It felt like ages, but it must have been 2 to 3 seconds at most. Suddenly, the guy in the rear shouts something to his buddies along the lines of, "Oh, to hell, it's a guy," shuts the door, and they speed away at like 80 miles per hour on a residential street. I was relieved, but mostly confused. I updated my friend and let them know I'm all right. Then I walked inside. I'm a guy, 5'9" and slightly overweight with a bit of a baby face, so I don't exactly come across as intimidating to most people I meet. So I doubt I scared them off because of my appearance alone. I'm terrified to think of what could have happened to me if I were a female. It's legitimately really messed up. Why am I safe from these things meanwhile my sister and my female friends have no choice but to keep guns in their cars, get tiny cans of pepper spray for their keychains, and avoid being alone in general? It's a scary place out there. Whether you're male or female or anything else, always be vigilant. I used to think my neighborhood was relatively safe, but now I'm afraid of sitting in my driveway at night. Hello everyone. I have a story that still sticks in my mind. I was 18 years old at that time. In those days, I was a party girl, going out 3 times a week and drinking a lot. That time was wild. I decided to host a party. It was my very first party, and I rented a space in my village. It was a cabin on location for events, very cheap for locals. I organized everything with my best friend, let's call her Mary, and another friend named Rose. We were having fun decorating and preparing the party. I was so stressed about the party was going to be lame. I decided to cope the stress with some alcohol. When the party started and people arrived, I was already tipsy. I invited unrelated people I knew from middle school to high school, and some friends I had made at college. Even though no one knew anyone, the party was great and people were meeting each other. I had a boyfriend who was coming with his friends. We were already 30. It was late summer, so the weather was mild and most people were outside talking, laughing, and dancing. I had this middle school friend, let's call her Luna, who binged drink and threw up at the entrance of the cabin. She even hurt her foot, and so she had some difficulties walking. I was at that point, drunk, but I wanted to help my friend. I asked her if she wanted to be put to bed, and she said yes. I took her arm and guided her to my house. I live in a small village in the countryside, so it takes less than 5 minutes to get to my house. It was super safe. I used to wander alone in the streets late at night, about 1 a.m. to 4 a.m., when I had insomnia and nothing ever happened. It was pitch dark. We were the only ones outside. As we walked, we saw a white SUV, but I didn't think much of it. I came home, gave her some water, and let her sleep in my room. I was alone with my sister that night. I warned her of the presence of my friend and headed back to the party. I was not walking straight since I was so intoxicated. I saw the white SUV parked near the farm. As I continued walking, a black car stopped next to me and opened its windows. I looked at the man. I still don't know what age he was. It was so dark. He said to me, "I've seen this white SUV following you for a while. It is dangerous. You should come to my car." I was drunk, but I directly felt that something was wrong. I just answered that I was okay and my friends were nearby. He insisted. He repeated to come to his car for my safety. My inner alarm went off as I was trying to walk faster and answered again that I was okay. Suddenly, I heard the car's door opened. He was not alone. I didn't think twice. I started running for my life. I arrived quickly to the cabin. My friends were all drunk. One of my drunk male friends was complimenting Rose. They saw me coming at them in a hurry. The male friend looked at me and started to compliment me. I told him, "Man, someone is trying to abduct me." He stared at me and told me that I shouldn't have left alone. That is not safe. The party lasted until 4 a.m. People who didn't drink took their car and left. The few others were inside the cabin and started to talk. One of my boyfriend's friends was mad on the Snapchat group because he forgot his knife at the cabin. Why did he carry a knife with him at a party? I told them about what happened and we were all spooked. After that event, I stopped wandering in the village late at night, but I hosted a few other parties. I have never seen this man in his black car again. Most people keep telling me how great the party was. A couple who met at the party are still together. I still wonder to this day, what would have happened to me if I didn't react that spontaneously? Before I begin, I would like to apologize as English isn't my first language. I wasn't sure if this qualified as creepy enough, but I just read something similar, so here's my story. A couple days ago, I was walking my dog around the lake at my condominium, like I always do. It was around 6:30 p.m., and the sky was getting a little bit dark. My dog is a golden retriever, and she is very friendly with people and other dogs. She is just 6 months old, and she rarely barks or growls at anybody. She actually loves being petted by strangers, but she is usually very calm regardless of if people pet her or not. Anyway, we were walking and suddenly I turned around and I saw this guy coming out of nowhere. The guy looked odd. He had glasses and he walked nervously. He was still far away from us, so I don't think he was nervous about my dog. As he got closer to us, I just stopped and moved to the side like I usually do when there is somebody coming from behind us. I do this so they can walk ahead of us, and my dog stops constantly, looking back, moving its tail, looking forward to being pet. But instead, my dog just starts getting restless and starts growling nervously while looking at that guy. I tried to calm her down and I smiled at the guy trying to be friendly, but the guy just looked at me with a serious face and started reaching for something out of his backpack. At this point, my dog just starts barking and I get this bad feeling and a shiver goes down my spine. For a second, I thought, what if the guy had a weapon or something? The guy just kept walking, looking at me while reaching for his backpack, as my dog kept barking at him. I apologized for my dog's behavior and tried to tell him that my dog usually doesn't behave like that, but the guy just ignored me. Finally, he just passes us and my dog stops barking, but she is still agitated. I just sat down next to her trying to calm her down while the guy just got lost between some of the houses instead of just walking the lake path, which seemed very weird to me. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe the guy just didn't like dogs, which is fine. I try to be really respectful to people who don't like dogs. After he got lost from our sight, my dog just went back to being her usual friendly self, and we were able to finish our walk. But something felt really weird about the guy, and the encounter made me feel very uncomfortable. I'm a young teen, like 11 to 14. I'm quite small, not trying to say anything, but I'm a female. And I have bad anxiety, so I usually keep my head down and stay away from situations. Well, recently I've gotten a bit more chaotic and unwinded a bit, so I've been doing more riskier stuff. Anyways, I took my friends to the mall for a girls' day, and we were there from morning until nighttime. My father brought everyone back home, and one of my closer friends decided to stay the night. So we got back to my house and pulled all of our stuff inside the house and played video games for around an hour. Then I had the brilliant idea to go to the park. My friend agreed, so we got ready, and around this time it was 12:40 a.m. till almost 1 a.m. My dad hesitantly led us, but if the park had a closing time, we had to walk the block instead. The park ended up being closed, so we walked the block. My friend was a bit scared, so she FaceTimed her girlfriend and we listened to music on my AirPods and got some pictures. By now, 10 minutes into walking the block, a few times my friend got off the phone and we planned on going back. I have to explain what the block looks like. My house is in the middle, the park is at the corner, and a few family friends live near. So we walked down one of the roads one last time, and there was a party going on at one of the houses next to the park. When we originally walked to the park, a boy at the party called me and my friend emo. There was a truck next to the house facing the park and 3 people in the truck. One man in his 30s was still getting into the truck. He looked at me for a few seconds. We waited for them to drive by while standing on the park grounds at the entrance. But the truck didn't move. My friend stopped to change the playlist on my phone while I watched the truck. Then, after the men in the truck watched us for a few minutes, they pulled into the park inches away from my friend and I. I grabbed my friend's arm and pulled her, and we ran as fast as we could. The truck took a U-turn and started following us, so I ran into a lady's yard with my friend hoping they would think it was our house. They stopped for a little bit and ended up driving past me and my friend. We then ran back to my house and told my dad and didn't leave the house until morning. I don't know. What do you think? Was this a very sketchy encounter? Were we almost kidnapped? This happened to me, in my 20s at the time, about 5 to 6 years ago. I went out for dinner with a friend. I had left my car at her condo since we carpooled. While we returned to the condo, we parted ways. She went to her unit by elevator and I walked to my car parked outside. It was around 11 p.m. and there were lots of lights around, but I still took precaution, considering that wasn't the best part of town. No one else was outside, no cars leaving or coming in. I got in my car, a RAV4, and proceeded to drive on my merry way home as usual. I pulled up to a red light and a white SUV pulled up beside me. I absent-mindedly looked around and then looked to my right and made eye contact with the driver. Not sure how long he was staring for, but it was super creepy. I suddenly got a cold, sweaty feeling. Proceeded to drive down the long street and his car was always beside mine. I noticed he was matching my speed and trying to look over at me. I ignored it. This went on for 15 minutes down the same street. My house was another 15 minutes away. There were other cars, but they mostly turned into the smaller streets. This was typically a busy street, but not at that time. I was nervous the entire time, so I texted my friend and my boyfriend to let them know what was happening, but I was fine for now. And maybe I was misinterpreting this? I don't know. At one point, the street became one lane because of the cars parked on the right side overnight. So the SUV ended up behind me the whole way. I finally made a turn to another main street where there was more traffic. Somehow he kept up and was pretty much tailing me. I called my boyfriend, freaking out and almost crying at this point. He told me to stay calm and to try and turn onto another major street, not to a small one in case anything happened. We hit an area with construction workers working on the road, so 2 lanes were closing. I was in the far left lane. He pulled up to the pylons to my right and rolled down his window. I'm pretty sure he was shouting at me at this point. His lips were moving, but I don't know what in the hell he said. He pointed at me to roll down my window. He looked angry and a little deranged. I sped off as soon as the light changed, but he was stuck in that lane because no one was letting him through. I was able to get home safely, and my boyfriend met up with me in the garage. I was shaken, but thankfully it never happened again. P.S. When I told this story to my friends, there was a question of, what if there was something wrong with your car and he just wanted to tell you? But there wasn't. No flat tire or open door, gas cap was intact. To this day, I have no idea what he wanted, and I don't think I ever want to know. It seems like I learned the hard way to be extremely cautious when going outside. This really unnerving event occurred a couple weeks ago, and I have to admit, I'm still a little paranoid. I'm a 16-year-old girl. The 5 friends that were with me during that day are the same age and all female as well. We all decided to hang out at my house that day, considering we all haven't been with each other since the summer started. It was early afternoon by the time everyone had arrived. We were all having fun, playing video games, chatting, and watching videos for the first few hours. A little later, as we sat through some quiet and awkward moments of boredom, one of my friends suggested we should go outside somewhere. Our first thought was to walk to a nearby grocery store, but that was immediately eliminated off the list, since it was going to be a 10 to 15 minute walk in 90 degrees Fahrenheit heat. I spoke up, saying there's a small park only a few minutes away from my house. We all agreed to the idea, getting ourselves ready to head out. As I told my mom where we were going, I locked the door behind us and started walking. We spent at least an hour at the park. We're all exhausted while, at the same time, not ready to leave just yet. We settled down at a picnic table and passed time chatting until one of my friends noticed a red car parked on the side of the street a little ways away from us, at the very front of the park. I didn't think of it as anything until she mentioned the man inside was repeatedly looking over at us. We thought it was odd, but nothing harmful. Still, we decided to leave, taking a different route home, just in case. We arrived at the same street my house was on, relieved that we didn't see the same car, but anxious that it would appear again. It seemed like our suspicions were confirmed. The car then drove by us, slowly. The man inside getting a closer look at us as we got a closer look at him and his vehicle. He was African American, slim, wearing a white baseball cap and muscle top, and driving a red 2003 Honda CR-V. He stopped adjacent to my house, out of all places. I was now unsure of what to do. One of my friends told me to call my parents, and I reluctantly complied. I called my dad and asked him to get us outside the house. He was slightly confused, but he agreed to do so anyway. A few seconds later, I saw my dad on our front lawn, and we rushed over to tell him about that red car that was still parked near us. He ushered us inside, all while keeping an eye on that creepy man. We all sat down to take a rest as my dad was taking pictures of the car and the license plate. We were all discussing what had just happened, and one of my friends apparently noticed something we did not. According to her, when the man parked his car, leaned back in his seat and had his phone facing us through his rear window, and he was staring at us through his rearview mirror. It made me feel sick and disgusted, wondering what that bastard planned on doing with the photos and videos he took of us. We continued observing the same car that was in the same place for another 10 minutes, until my dad started pulling out of our driveway to leave for work. My dad started driving in the direction of the car, and the creep booked it out of there, fearing the possible confrontation. My friends and I released a sigh of relief, and we all returned to having a fun afternoon. At least now I have a picture of the car and a license plate, so I can identify it. I haven't seen the man ever since, and thank God. Better stay that way. So I tell you all, please keep a lookout around you. You never know who may be lurking in the shadows. It was October 31st, Halloween. At this time, my parents were still together and hadn't divorced yet. So me and my siblings stayed with each other, but my family did this thing where half of us go with my mother and the other half go with my father. I had 5 siblings, but at this time my little sister wasn't born, so it was just 4. Me and my sister, 3 years younger than me, went with my dad, and my little brother and sister went with my mother. I had called up some friends to ask them if they wanted to go trick-or-treating with me, and only one of my friends said that they could make it. Let's call her Elle. My dad picked up Elle, and we drove to this big neighborhood, beautiful houses, so more candy. Me and Elle wandered off while my dad stayed with my sister. I was very hyper and from time to time would run off and leave my friend behind so I could get more candy and get to every house before Halloween was over. Halfway through trick-or-treating, me and Elle walked so far that no more kids were around us. We chatted about school and drama and what we were going to do with our candy. You know, shit like that. After what I would say was 7 minutes, we heard a scrappy sound, like someone was scraping something on the concrete. We turned around to the sound and saw a person dressed in a killer clown costume, walking with a bat. Me and Elle were walking in the middle of the street, confused but a little scared. I had always hated clowns, so I sped up a bit, and so did Elle. We kept turning our heads around to see the clown. After about 30 seconds, the clown stopped walking and stood there facing us. Now, at this point, it's quiet, and we are very scared, so we told each other we should go meet up with my dad. We whip our heads around to see the clown once more, and out of nowhere, he starts running, full sprint, towards us. We burst out running, screaming, and not even paying attention to where we are running. It was a steep and quiet road, like a back road that used to be in my old apartments. The clown is screaming with us. It did not turn back, but Elle later on told me that the clown was holding his bat up like he was gonna hit us. Me and Elle hit a corner that led to a familiar street. We crossed the street without a thought in our heads, and when we reached the other side, it was quiet. We didn't hear any more screaming. He was gone. He was no longer behind us. After running around, we found my dad and told him everything. He believed us because our tears and screams, and also most likely because we were 9-year-old children, and the look of terror on our faces. The worst fear is now killer clowns and forever will be. Me and Elle will never forget that moment and talk about it from time to time to this day. It has traumatized me. Thinking back at it now, the clown might have been a dumbass teenager in a costume trying to scare little kids. What a freaking sicko. So, this happened after dark this past Christmas Eve. I work a second shift from 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. or until we're done. I should also mention that while the warehouse is in a nicer area, a couple blocks down, it gets very sketchy at night. We got done at around 2 a.m., and me and my one friend were the first out to the parking lot, and we're standing there talking while we were warming up our cars. We were talking for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and during that time, I saw this small sedan drive by, very slowly, but didn't think much of it because it was a little icy out and figured they were just being cautious. But then, I saw it slowly coming back down the road from the west and pulled in and parked in the parking lot across from us, which was strange because it's a welding shop parking lot and no one is ever there past 10 p.m. besides police doing speed traps. At that point, I pointed it out to my friend and he said he noticed it as well and thought it was weird. Then this big dude got out of the car and walked across the street over to me and my friend while the car he got out of drove off. He asked my friend for a smoke, and as he did that, I walked over to my car to start scraping it off, and so he would hopefully just not talk to me. But as soon as I stepped back out of my car with my wallet in hand, so I could use one of my cards to scrape the windows, he called over to me. I didn't want to be rude even though something felt off about the situation, but I said to hell with it. There's cameras watching me and the rest of the workers should be out within 10 minutes, so I'll be fine. I'm 6 foot, 180 pounds, soaking wet, and the dude was a good bit bigger than me. I'm guessing he was 6'2 to 6'4 and a solid 250 plus pounds. He was trying to make small talk with me, asking about what we do there, how it sucks we have to work on Christmas Eve, just random bullshit like that. But I got the feeling he was sizing me up. So, even though I have extreme social anxiety and can usually barely make eye contact even with people I know, I remembered my grandpa always telling me that if I'm in a sketchy situation with someone, to stand tall, chest out a bit, make direct eye contact the entire time, essentially do whatever to make you look like you aren't scared or nervous, so you look like you're more trouble than you're worth. I saw him keep looking down towards my wallet, so I took a small step back so I could make sure I was in the view of the cameras. Then he said, "So, hey man, do you think you can give me a ride to my house? It's just right down the road. I ran out of gas at the store and need to go back to my house and get money." Now, the grocery store he said his car ran out of gas at is about a mile down the road to the east, but yet the dude came from the west. And also, if he needed a ride to his house in the west, why wouldn't he have just gotten one from the person who dropped him off, who came from the direction in the first place? I then remembered reading online somewhere that around the holidays, people will do whatever they can to try to get someone to give them a ride, and then they force them to take them back to their house and rob them. At this point, I'm like, to hell with this. This dude is trying to rob me, so I just walk backwards towards my car since I know I have a giant utility knife under the seat, and tell him I'm good and to please get off our company property. And he was like, "Come on, man, it's Christmas Eve," while looking visibly pissed. And I said, "That sucks, dude. Get off the property." At this point, I'm at my car, and he can see me reaching under the seat, and he then turns and walks away, and disappears into the alley a block away. I then go over to my friend's car to tell him what had happened, and he said the dude was trying to get him to give him money for smokes, and then he tried to get him to give him a ride to the ATM. 2 days later, a picture of the same guy is on the local police department's Facebook page, asking for information on him because he was wanted in relation to a string of armed robberies that happened during Christmas week. I was hiking in the Olympic National Forest a few years ago, by myself and my 2 dogs. We were 4 days in, around 20 miles at least as a crow flies from even a known mountain. I was camping at around 7,000 feet that night, or right where the tree line started thinning out. So, when we got to the campsite, a big, open meadow on top of a secondary mountain, it was about an hour from sunset. My big dog usually turns around within proximity of the camp as I put the tent up and make dinner, etc. But I noticed this time was a little different. He kept staring up this steep, tree-filled mountainside, tail straight up and barking. Not the bark when he sees marmots, or not the excited, "Oh, you MFers are lucky because I'd rip you all apart if my master weren't here," high-pitched barks. But unsure, concerned barks. Now, the day before I had found a note left under a rock at the last landmark, saying that there was a bear problem in the area that was harassing a party of campers a few days ago, and I myself had seen big cat tracks the day before. So I was rightfully concerned that this may be more than just ground squirrels. I decided to go climb some of the boulders at the foot of the hill while I took my time looking up the hillside for movement before I went to go hang my bear bag up there. They were the only trees around to hang the bag. I didn't see or hear anything, but my dog kept quietly whining like there was something up there. So, while still concerned, I started hiking up this very steep hill to hang the bag. It was so steep I had to use the trees to balance and lean against so I didn't go tumbling down before making another 5 to 6 step push to the next tree I could lean against. Anyway, I'm slowly making it up this hill and ridge, hopping from one tree to keep my balance. Then I get about 100 feet up the hill, and I hear a whole lot of big movement around 50 feet in front of me. My dog immediately goes from a deep, low growl to a savage, slobber flying everywhere type barking now. My heart starts pounding out of my chest, and I start to panic. A million thoughts go racing through my head in the matter of seconds. Because if this is a bear, my dog is going to try to save me, in which he will most likely die. And I'm stuck here. If I have to get off that hillside fast, I almost 100% am certain I'm going to trip and fall off the 12 to 15 foot cliff onto the boulders below, like hundreds of 5 to 20 feet boulders. So I'm feeling pretty screwed right about now. Then I hear my other little dog start barking and freaking out down at the campsite, which was just out of sight. I had zipped her in my tent, so she didn't wander off while I was away. So yeah, I'm absolutely panicking at this point. A few seconds after, I kinda snap back to it, and I take another few seconds to start to put my survival priorities in order, and call my dog back to me. Loki, by the way. He comes and sits against my feet as my back is against a tree, so I'm kind of pinned and stuck there for a moment. But my dog was seemingly trying to separate me from something up there, so I let him lean against me while I tried to collect myself. This is when I realized I had completely forgotten that I had my headlamp on. I reached up so fast to turn my headlamp on, I basically punched myself in the face. I'm having some serious adrenaline dumps going on right now, so much so that my knees are starting to shake. I get my headlamp on and peer up the hillside. I figure I'll at least get a reflection off the eyes of whatever is up there. Peering, nothing. But I had just heard something. We both did. And whatever it was, it didn't get away or sound like it had made it too far. I knew something was there, so I'm kind of just steadfast at this point. I need to know what is up there because I have to sleep here tonight. And I'm out in the middle of nowhere alone. Better to face it than wait like a sitting duck all night is my thought process. So yeah, as I'm looking up this hill, and at one point my dog lunges forward, unpinning me. He keeps a fake, bluff charge up the hill about 15 feet, and I mean he's snarling and foaming at the mouth at this point. As he does this, I finally see movement. Something moving up and breaking the line of the horizon and sunset. My dog's bluff made whatever it was blow its cover, so I'm zeroed in. I call my dog back and silently watch, and what I make out made my heart completely drop. There was a man crouched about 75 feet directly in front of me, wearing, not camo clothes, but some raggedy shit with a hood that blended into the environment perfectly. Actually, almost like a makeshift guile suit, but with his face exposed. I couldn't see his eyes and his face was covered in dirt or something, but I knew we were staring right at each other at that moment. So, I stare for what seems like minutes, no words. I feel like I was trying to subconsciously convey that I was going to stand my ground. I wanted him to know I saw him, but I guess I was just too shaken to speak. As I'm staring, my little dog back at the campsite started to bark her head off again, like she was scared. And I also had to get off that hill before total dark, or I could be seriously hurt and risk dying trying to get back down. So, carefully, I start heading down the hill with my dog, who doesn't want to leave but listens. Periodically, I would stop with my back against a tree holding me up, and look in that direction again, just to make it even more clear I saw him. And eventually, I make it down to the boulders at the bottom. By the time I finally jumped down and hit the boulders, my little dog had stopped barking. I could only see the top of my tent from the bottom of the boulders. I thought she was barking just to bark. Dachshunds do that. Or just barking back at my dog. But when I get there, my little dog had somehow got out of the tent and was walking around the camp growling with her little tail sticking straight out. Still trying to hold it together, I thought, okay, maybe she just got her nose between the zipper and worked her way out. But I was positive I had zipped it, so the zipper tap and opening was at the very top of the tent door, out of reach. So in a mixture of being terrified and pissed off and the feeling of needing to do something, I reached into my day bag and pulled out my .40. I fired a single shot in the air as the sun was setting, climbed into my tent without eating, and laid down with my gun next to me until first light. As soon as the sun came up, I was packing up my shit and leaving, heading back down the mountain. It sucks. It was all downhill back, but I still couldn't cover the ground to get back to my car in one day. It was dark by the time I made it to the last camp, about 4 miles from my vehicle. But thankfully, there were other people there. We sat around a fire they made, and I felt pretty relieved and safe. They start to tell me they are planning to head that way where I was the night before in the morning. So I tell them my story in detail. Needless to say, we were both walking back to our cars in the morning. Screw all of that. The thing that creeps me out still to this day, though, is when I got home and started reading reviews of the same hike I was on. Other people had had similar experiences like mine as well. Even a man found dead from a fall around the same boulder range 2 years ago, and a woman found murdered just last year. For the last couple of years, I have been dealing with a creep who lives on my street. The street is a through road, and the creep lives about 1 block down on the other side of the street from me. It started with him trying to speak to me when I was walking my dogs. I walked around the corner of a building and he was there in front of me. He seemed kind of awkward, and I said hi in response to his greeting and kept walking. But then he was at the same place the following morning. When he was there on the third day, I realized that he wasn't walking, and we happened to see each other. He was waiting at that spot. So I decided to walk a bit earlier. That worked okay for about a week. Then he was there again. I adjusted my route to avoid that spot. Again, that lasted about a week. I turned into a side street around a high fence, and there he was. I again changed the timing of my walk, and he worked it out after about a week. I kept changing things up for the next few months, and periodically would see him when walking. About that time, I hurt my foot. While I was recovering, my husband was walking the dogs instead of me. Then, I happened to be in the local supermarket on the weekend, and, lo and behold, the creep is there. I keep seeing him as I'm walking around, and he queued up behind me at the register and tries talking to me. I got out of the store really fast while he was being checked out and left. Now, I should add that at this stage, the creep seemed to me to possibly have an intellectual disability, but I wasn't thinking creep back then. I felt sorry for him. He seemed lonely. I am now aware that my judgment is off as a result of childhood traumas, but back then just thought that I needed to avoid him. So, I'm back walking, and I continue to change the times that I walk in my route. Occasionally, I would see him, but generally I managed to avoid him. My husband and I then moved out of our home for a few months because the roof needed replacing, and asbestos was found which had to be removed. We lived with family during this time. I don't think the creep has a car because I rarely saw him during this period. When I did see him, it was outside the supermarket, elsewhere in town, or near my work. When we moved back home, several months went by that I didn't see him when I was walking. I thought that, thankfully, he had lost interest. Then, when I least expected it, he comes seemingly out of nowhere, and he's right in front of me. I can't cross the street at this point, and my only options are to keep walking and get past him, or to turn around and go back the way I came. Turning around with a dog on a lead can be tricky, so I just keep going. I don't make eye contact and move as fast as I can without running. As I'm passing, he says, "Good morning, sexy. How are you, gorgeous?" Although I wasn't confident the police would take me seriously, I went to the police. I am very grateful to the young officer who spoke to me. He acknowledged that up until that morning when the creep called me sexy, it was a bit iffy whether they could have got a restraining order. But with that, plus his past behaviors and my attempts to mitigate the situation, the police would apply for a court order to stop him. I only knew his first name and address, but they were able to work out his full name. And it was on my copy of the application paperwork as well. It has taken a few months, but he didn't contest the application, and the personal safety order has been made. He is not permitted to approach me or attempt to speak to me, and he is not to walk on the footpath past my house. He can walk on the other side of the street, though. Unfortunately, he has continued to walk past my house, and I sometimes see him when I am out walking, which I am nothing in reporting to the police every time he does. But he has not spoken to me since the order was made. So, all in all, a pretty low-level creep, right? Wrong. I was sorting through old paperwork at work the other day as my office shreds and bins anything 7 years or older, unless we need to keep it longer. I found a note that the creep had come into my work 7 years earlier, giving a different address and had spoken with me. Later, when I called him about his inquiry, he became inappropriate. That's what the note says. and was told the business would not be dealing with him anymore. Now I'm wondering if he moved to his current address because it was just down the street from my house. This happened in the early to mid 1980s. I was about 12, and I had a group of friends that I hung out with regularly. I lived in Kenner, Louisiana. Anyway, there was this fad back then to open these teen nightclubs. No alcohol, disco music, and the same vibe as the cocaine-induced frenzy of adult disco clubs. Anyway, one was opening up. My friends could not stop talking about it. I hate crowds, but I was a follower in my group, so I agreed to go with everybody. One of our parents dropped us off. We paid our $2 to get in. I can see that it's super crowded, shoulder to shoulder. I kind of just hung out around the front door debating whether or not I was gonna stay. After 10 or 15 minutes pass, I get this feeling like someone's watching me. Just an eerie, creepy vibe. So I just start looking around. There's a lot of people, so it's like a blur. Then I notice this middle-aged guy, short brown hair, striped collared shirt. He's just staring at me like he knows me or something. Well, I knew I didn't know him, and that was my cue to leave. It was about a 5-mile walk down a well-lit, semi-busy 2-lane highway, then right and another couple miles down a 4-lane road into the subdivision. It's only about 8 p.m. and I don't have to be home until midnight, so I had time to walk it, so I take off walking. And I guess about halfway home, this car pulls up on a side road that I was crossing, and it's the same guy from the nightclub. My heart starts pounding out of my chest. He creeped me out around 200 people. I was really creeped out on an isolated side street by myself. He yells at me and asks if I want to ride. It's pretty far, but to hell with that. I said no and kept walking. Then he yells at me, "You want to make an easy $20? And I'm dumb. I stop and ask, how? He says, "Get in the car and I'll tell ya." Nope, I just bolted. I took off, and I don't think I've ever ran that fast in my entire life. I ran the last 3.5 miles full speed without stopping and without looking back. I made it home, ran inside the house and straight to my room. I didn't even think to look back to see if he was following me, but if he came here, at least my dad was in the living room. I never told anybody. I really think I was one dumb move away from being on a milk carton. Or worse. This scene happened when I was 21 years old. It is in a smaller town outside of a huge city in the Midwest. This was 1981. I worked at fast food and they stayed open until 3 a.m. My then husband worked for a bowling alley as a manager, and he was never off before 2 a.m. I was expecting my first child and business was slow, so I was sent home at 1 a.m. In the town we lived in, there was a large private girls' college. Women were being warned to lock their car doors because 2 males were seen on the loose that were targeting women around my age. They were sometimes following them home and attacking or forcing a woman alone late at night off the road. The men were sexually assaulting and killing the women. They had killed 3 women by this point. 2 of the women were found on deserted roads and 1 in her apartment. There was no description of these men or what kind of vehicle they drove. I left work, climbed into my car, locked my doors, and started for home. The hair on the back of my head stood straight on end, and my gut feeling told me something was very wrong. I figured out that I was being followed home. I took several turns around town trying to shake this car, but to no avail. The advice given was that if you thought you were being followed, to drive to the police station. We had recently moved to this area, so I had no idea where the police station even was. I was terrified, panicked, and couldn't think what to do. This was in the days of no cell phones, but the payphones were made in different areas where you could drive up to them, sit in the driver's seat, put your window down, and the payphones had a longer cord to enable you to stay in your car and talk. You still had to deposit money in order to talk, even if you were calling 911. I thought briefly about trying to get to one of these phones, but I was too scared and didn't think I could have a coin ready in time before these men could have time to approach me. My parents lived about 4 streets over from where I lived, and I decided the safest decision was to try to make it to my parents' house. I was still being followed when I got to my parents' house. There was a short block you could go around by my parents, and I went around the block about 3 times, and every time I did, I honked the horn. You would have thought laying on the horn would have discouraged these creeps from continuing to follow me, but it had no effect. If anything, they moved in closer behind me. I pulled into their driveway, and these creepers pulled right in behind me, turned off their lights, and I heard their doors open and shut. I was beyond terrified at this point. They were out of their car, one coming up on one side and one on the other. My parents' house was a split level, and you pulled up in front of a double car garage. In order to get into the house, you had to go through the garage door or front door, and the front door was to the left of the driveway, about 2 car lengths away, plus a set of steps. I laid on the horn again. They still kept coming. My dad, who is retired military, oftentimes stayed up late at night watching TV. Thank God he did this night. All of a sudden, he turned on the porch light and burst out the front door. He assessed the situation instantly and started yelling at these creeps to get the hell away from my car, all the while barreling down the steps towards them. At first, they didn't retreat very fast, but must have thought better. My dad is very big-boned and about 6'4" tall. He had a brother that played in college football, and he wore a size 15 Triple E shoe. He made it to the front of their car and pounded on the hood of it before they were able to burn rubber, reversing out of the driveway. While he was unable to get a license plate number, because they didn't even have a front plate, he was able to describe them and give make and model to police. Police told me how fortunate I was that my dad had realized what a dire situation I was in. I still get chills thinking back to that night. I remember it as if it were yesterday. My dad said he thought he heard a car honk more than once, and then he heard me in the driveway. He had just shut off the TV and was heading for bed when I pulled in. Thank God my dad acted so quickly, or I might not be writing this today. This incident has caused me to be hyper aware of my surroundings, and I never turn into my driveway without making sure I'm not being followed. Always be mindful of where you are, and don't walk around with your headphones on or phone pressed against your ear. You never know when you may be an opportunistic moment for someone with ill intentions. Know where your local police station is, and if you ever get chills something is wrong, drive into the police station. The police are more than happy to help you out. Better safe than sorry. The police did capture these 2 creeps about 2 weeks later, and they didn't get a 4th victim. They were both on probation for kidnapping and sexual assault, served their time, and decided killing their victims left no witnesses. My dad is still my hero today. His quick actions prevented me from being that 4th victim, and the color, model, and make of the car my dad described was the description of what they were driving when they were arrested. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these true creepy encounters. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you are awake, I hope you've enjoyed this collection. Until next time, please look out for yourself and each other. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourself a good morning, a good afternoon, or good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.